In 2010, I was on the tiny Indonesian island of Bali, a developing country which really didn't have very good internet, particularly back then. It has a local population of several million and welcomed several million tourists a year. Cars over there were relatively new, most people rode scooters, and so therefore there certainly wasn't a motorsport culture. I got into a taxi over there with a driver who couldn't speak a word of English, and yet he was wearing a hat similar to this one. When I pointed at his hat and said, "Ken Block," he smiled at me instantly and said, "Yes, Ken Block." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the subject of today's video. I'm sure by now most of us know that there's a tragic passing of Ken Block, who was killed in a terrible accident early in January. A tragic loss and a big shock to his family, his friends, and certainly the wider motorsport community, and of course the millions of fans that he had garnered along the way. There have been thousands of tribute videos and posts on social media, and if I'm honest, I didn't really want to contribute to that. However, I do want to focus on a slightly different aspect and how that touches on rallying. I want to focus on the marketing, because that is something I think that's been a little bit missing, and something the rally world has been missing prior to Ken and will have a void to fill now. Ken was the one that discovered the secret sauce. Was Ken a fantastic driver? Yes, he was. Was he the only one that could drive like that? No, he wasn't. In fact, there's probably many drivers out there who can do the same things. And if we look at some of the other famous rally drivers in the world, say Ari Vartanen or Colin McRae, they were spectacular drivers as well. However, most of their driving was actually done in competition to win. One of the big problems with rallying, particularly that we face over here, is there is many spectacular corners and spectacular jumps and terrain and scenery that goes completely unseen by the public. If we're lucky, we'll have one or two or several spectator points, and maybe they're great corners. And that was probably no different to Ken in the US and probably most places around the world. However, Ken worked out that if he took all of those elements that are largely unseen and put them all together in one place and film it, you could really have some serious impact. And that's exactly what he did. So let's wind the clock back to what seems like a lifetime ago, back to the mid to early 2000s. 2005 was when Ken first started rallying, and back then social media and internet wasn't what it is today. I think we were only just introducing 3G phones back in those days, and so videos were grainy, and a little known website called YouTube was really just starting to get going. In 2006, Ken Block did something that nobody else had sort of done in a rally car. He jumped it 171 feet, and that was posted on social media, and it went what became known as viral. It would be a couple of years later though before things would really take off, pardon the pun, when Ken was kind of mucking around with some video at an airfield in the US, and he created the first video called Gymkhana. Now, for us who are in the sport, Gymkhana was really just showboating and fooling around. However, with the popularity of particularly YouTube and social media, this thing took off. It was kind of unexpected for Ken and his team at the time, who were, like I said, just kind of mucking around and practicing and having a bit of fun with it. And it spawned a series that would span right up until 2022. Having experience with marketing with DC Shoes, Ken soon realised that rallying wasn't going to give the exposure that he wanted for his sponsors. However, with YouTube and the Gymkhana series, he could reach a much wider audience, and apart from the production costs, actually airing the videos was free, and it could be watched over and over in multiple countries. Ken's popularity on social media certainly wouldn't go unnoticed, and it wasn't long before the then most popular television program in the world, Top Gear, decided to film a segment with James May where they did another Gymkhana style video. Several years later, the feat would then be repeated with new presenter Matt LeBlanc, where they'd drift around London in the V8 Unicorn. Amongst the Gymkhana videos and all the other spectacular stuff he did, including hacking around in the snow, he was also competing in several rally championships. He did the WRC at various events over the time, and also American Series, and also did a few regional rallies here and there as well with his cars.
I think the main thing is that Ken is in Finland, because particularly among the youngsters. I mean, he's a phenomenon, and I take my hat off to him how he has done. He has mastered this new virtual media or social media. He's an icon in that field. His presence will be highly appreciated. And
what I liked most about Ken was that whilst the Gymkhana and other videos were really an entertainment value, rallying was very regimented for him, and he was no playboy when he came to it. He was very disciplined, as is needed in the sport at the top level, and he took the cameras along and showed the warts and all view of how his rallying went. There were times when his car burned to the ground, he crashed, and even his 2022 Rally Championship didn't go exactly the way he'd wanted, which is a bit of a shame. However, he showed just what happens in motorsport, and it's no different for any one of us. It's certainly not all roses. In just a few short years, Ken had catapulted rallying and himself into the spotlight, particularly in the US, where the sport was relatively unknown. He'd become both an interpreter and an unofficial ambassador, doing a great deal for the sport. He learned how to speak the language between those who were in the sport and loved it and those that had no clue. He transcended age, country and culture by simply doing what he loved and taking some cameras along to film it.